Some new developments in the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. ICE detained the El Salvador native on Monday, with DHS saying that they do plan to deport him to the East African country of Uganda. These plans were blocked by a judge who says the administration is absolutely forbidden from deporting him until a hearing can be held on his deportation challenge. Now, in a post on X, the Department of Homeland Security said, quote, "Sanctuary politicians and the fake news won't tell you the truth about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an MS-13 gang member, human trafficker, wife beater, child predator, and criminal illegal alien, but we will."
The department followed that up with a series of posts detailing its allegations against Abrego Garcia, including that he has ties to the notorious MS-13 gang. Abrego Garcia has repeatedly denied these allegations, and some courts have said there is insufficient evidence linking him to the gang. Meanwhile, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen came to his defense after the news broke. He writes, "Trump's cronies keep lying about his case and are engaged in a malicious abuse of power to try to deport him to Uganda. As I told Kilmar, I won't stop fighting for justice and due process for all."
Abrego Garcia was wrongfully deported to El Salvador in March, but the Trump administration later said it was an administrative error and did return him to the U.S. in June. Now the DHS wants to send him to Uganda, which is one of several countries the U.S. has struck a deal with to send the deportees to. Here's what Attorney General Pam Bondi had to say about it.
We've got him under control. He will no longer terrorize our country. He's currently charged with human smuggling, including children. The guy needs to be in prison.
All right, Niall. Well, what's the problem? I was assured that the issue was just that he'd been sent to that prison in El Salvador. When the judge said he can't send him to El Salvador, he can send him somewhere else. We litigated his immigration status and a whole host of other things. Now they want to send him to Uganda, not to El Salvador, to Uganda. And I thought that was all fine, but I'm still seeing everybody worked up about it.
So, first of all, the initial problem was indeed that they sent him to El Salvador illegally. A judge had ordered that,
and they fixed it.
That they admitted it belatedly. They initially said, we can't get him back. Sorry about that. That's just too bad. Then all of a sudden we could get him back. And the reason we could get him back was because he was to be charged with these serious offences of smuggling, and justice must be done there. Now it turns out that justice doesn't necessarily need to be done there, because if they deport him to Uganda, they will drop or cease to have the criminal case against him. The thing that I think maybe we might share some concerns about here is the allegation by Abrego Garcia's lawyers that they have used the word coerce. I think we mentioned it in the introduction. Their argument is that he was offered a deal where if he pleaded guilty, he would go to Costa Rica, but if he pleaded not guilty, he would be sent to Uganda. Now, does that not, at least with your libertarian instincts, is that not a nefarious use of state power to say to someone, we'll literally send you to different sides of the world depending on how you plead in a criminal case?
I mean, sure, nefarious, completely run-of-the-mill for the justice system, right off. I mean, this is how they induce people to plead guilty all the time, because plead guilty and get a reduced sentence or maybe a time served or whatever, or risk trial and you could get 20 years, which is why in, I think, federal jurisdictions, people end up pleading guilty before the end of the trial in like upwards of 90% of cases. But the legal issue here is that his rights are less clear-cut because he doesn't have a right to remain in the country. He has due process rights against prosecution, but they can, and a judge has said that he can be sent out of, he is eligible to be deported from this country because he's not an American citizen. Not all of those statements about him are as well-founded as others. His membership in a gang has been at least, the evidence for that has been presented, and there was a judge who took it seriously. I don't know about the smuggling stuff. I'm just not up to date on that. There was a restraining order sought against him by his wife at one point. So anyway, they want to get him out of the country. He's eligible to be gotten out of the country, just not eligible to go to El Salvador. Is it a nefarious is the word you used? Sure, a tactic that law enforcement uses to try to get you to plead guilty to Costa Rica or Uganda, but he doesn't have, I don't know what to say, he doesn't have the right to remain here, right? You concede that. He's not
Yes.
There is nothing he points to say, I get to stay on America. I'm a Maryland man. Well, you're a native of El Salvador who entered the country illegally, who has caused enough consternation for law enforcement. He's not the hairdresser or some old lady who's just, he's had encounters with law enforcement that have some legitimate basis. So I don't know what else there is to say at this point.
So there are two.
He's going to go.
There are two separate issues. He did enter the country illegally, and he was indeed eligible for deportation. Now, we've just talked about the El Salvador element of it. The thing that I think people are protesting about is the idea that he is subject to vindictive treatment by the government. So it is not merely a case of this guy's in the country illegally and we're going to remove him. It is seeking to make a sort of cause célèbre out of his case and taking actions like the Uganda or Costa Rica thing, which are not run-of-the-mill in these manifestations. It is run-of-the-mill that people are offered plea deals, a process about which I have some skepticism actually, but they are not normally offered, well, we're going to send you to Africa if you don't plead guilty. And in relation to the charges against him, there is certainly the suspicion, I would say, in more liberal circles that the charges are either overcharged or entirely trumped up because some of the evidence against him seems so thin. Without getting too deep into the weeds of it, there's one instance where an informant against him never mentions in 3 successive interviews the gang affiliation, then allegedly mentions it in a 4th interview, of which the law enforcement agent interviewing this informant has no contemporaneous notes at all that was even said. So there are real doubts about the case against him, and therefore doubts about whether it is an attempt to not merely remove someone who is an illegal immigrant, but to make an example of someone against whom the administration erred in the first place.
Right, but there is no dispute over whether he is an illegal immigrant.
Correct.
And I mean, the position of some people in the Trump administration is that everyone who is here illegally is, well, they are. There's no dispute over whether they're eligible for deportation, and that effort and resources will be put toward deporting every one of them. Now, that's not what I want, but to even be able to make the conversation, I think, to MAGA that there should be some selectivity about who gets deported, I think sometimes you just have to concede, especially in this case, I would just fold and say he should be deported because it is ambiguous enough. Or I mean, I don't mean to dispute your validity of the fact. The informant came back with it later. I know that initial judge looked at it and took what the informant had to say seriously. Look, if he's truly the most innocent little angel who has ever existed and just happens to be an illegal immigrant, then this is an unfortunate situation for him, surely. I don't know whether that's the case, but he's going to be deported one way or the other.
Right, yeah, I mean, he probably is in the end. I mean, look, I am not arguing against his eligibility for deportation. He is eligible to be deported. The question is whether the administration is engaging in gratuitously vindictive treatment of him. Yeah. And I think there's a significant amount of evidence that they
I'm sure being deported to Costa Rica is far nicer than being deported to Uganda. I'm not sure that is, though. So you characterize that as real. It's unique, but it's the choice between 18 months in prison or 20 years in prison is also a pretty steep difference that you're typically offered. I would rather have the Uganda and Costa Rica choice than that, I think.
Fair enough. That's a fair point. Next on Rising, Trump is going after broadcast media networks yet again. Stay with us for that.